What does manhood mean to you?
Okay, I have to put that in the context of manhood for African American men in the United States. I'm a product of the 60s and 70s, and it's now in history books, the Black Power movement. I still have a little bit of feistiness in me. But what I have found out that in the United States, unfortunately, from the beginning of the African Holocaust in 1619 to the summer of George Floyd, which is experience, the founders of our country, and I use the descriptor, wealthy, white, male slave owners. They wrote the Constitution for themselves. They wrote the Constitution so that they could be in charge. And the progeny, here we are in 2021, are still in charge and still running the country. The problem with being a Black man today is slightly different from earlier, from slavery through Reconstruction, through the Black Codes, through Jim Crow, is that I have found that we should not depend upon any institution to give us our manhood. We have to seize our manhood.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of King Crush Thursday, the series where we highlight and uplift Black men because frankly, not too many people are doing it. My name is Val Gay, and I have the privilege of bringing to you yet another amazing king. We are in the company of absolute royalty. Dr. Clayton White is a retired educator and church musician, an active composer, arranger, organist, amazing choir, the Clayton White singer. It's just amazing. And we are grateful to have him be with us. I should mention, Dr. White received his doctorate in 1969. Think about that, at a time when right now, less than 1% of our population has doctors. Dr. White got his over 50 years ago. And so without any further ado, please welcome Dr. Clayton White. Hi, Dr. White.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. Sir, as I have told you before, we are creating a repository of questions and answers where we are asking the same 6 questions to everyone with the goal of having a young king who may or may not have positive male role models in his life can come to this repository, see the same questions, and hear a myriad of answers and hopefully find inspiration and direction for his life there. And for the rest of us who are not male or maybe even Black, can also see into the answers of this incredible body of people called Black men. Is my longstanding belief that Black men don't necessarily get their due in the broader media, and that I know from my own life, the richness of our community, the myriad of experiences, and it's mostly positive. And so I want to shed a light on that. And so I'm so glad that you are with us here today to contribute to this repository. And so we're going to get started with our first question, which is, what does manhood mean to you?
Okay, I have to put that in the context of manhood for African American men in the United States. I'm a product of the 60s and 70s, and it's now in history books, the Black Power movement. I still have a little bit of feistiness in me. But what I have found out that in the United States, unfortunately, from the beginning of the African Holocaust in 1619 through the summer of George Floyd's experience, the founders of our country, and I use the descriptor, wealthy, white, male slave owners. They wrote the Constitution for themselves. They wrote the Constitution so that they could be in charge. And the progeny, here we are in 2021, are still in charge and still running the country. The problem with being a Black man today is slightly different from earlier, from slavery through Reconstruction, through the Black Codes, through Jim Crow, is that I have found that we should not depend upon any institution to give us our manhood. We have to seize our manhood. The route that I took was to realize when I was fairly young that there was prejudice. When I was a child, I liked Hopalong Cassidy. Now, you don't know who that is. That goes back to when I was about 8 or 9. He was one of the cowboys, right? And he had a horse, what's a Trigger, I think. Anyway, I loved Hopalong Cassidy, and I got an album, a record, and it had a story, and every time the horse whinnied, you turned the page. So I found out that Hopalong Cassidy was going to be at one of the department stores downtown. I think it was Gimbel's. He was going to kiss the mothers and shake hands with the little buckaroos. I was excited, and we went down to the store, stood in line, and when it was our turn, Hopalong Cassidy didn't kiss my mother on the cheek. Hopalong Cassidy didn't shake my hand, and we were just ushered on the side. Now, I asked my mother, why didn't Hopalong Cassidy? And she really didn't have an answer for me. Another time on Market Street, way back in the 50s, 40s and 50s, there were a lot of movie theaters and penny arcades. And we went to the movie theater with my mother, and she said, okay, let's go upstairs in the balcony. I said, well, I don't want to sit in the balcony. Let's go upstairs in the balcony. I couldn't understand why she took me to the balcony. Well, at that time in Philadelphia, Black people were expected to sit in the balcony. Now, imagine having to tell your child, 8, 9 years old, that they are inferior to other folks, and you really don't have the same rights. Well, as I got older, I realized that for myself. And I decided, especially during the Black Power movement, and I joined some organizations, I actually tried to be a freedom rider. The people who went down south, actually we went to the Maryland Eastern Shore because I was just as racist as any place else. And we were going to stage sit-ins. So we had a practice session, and I found out that I was not nonviolent. The practice sessions were, they would pour soda, coffee on you, burn you with cigarettes, and they were supposed to sit there and take it. Well, then I found out I wasn't nonviolent, so they didn't let me go. So I had to stay home and man the phones. There is a place for nonviolence, but I just wasn't a nonviolent person. I also found out during my career and as a music teacher, I went to Temple University. I was lucky to get a full ride scholarship. My father passed when I was 12. I was taking piano lessons and they stopped because we ran out of money. But I was smart enough to get into Central High School, and I was able to get a scholarship. And interestingly enough, the scholarship was from the John McKee Foundation. You may not have heard that name, but John McKee was a black businessman, like Stephen Girard. Stephen Girard started Girard College. Well, John McKee wanted to start a school for orphan Black boys. Unfortunately, he didn't have sufficient funds for the college. So the Court of Common Pleas set up a scholarship fund, and each year they granted 4 scholarships to deserving Black youth. Well, I was fortunate enough to get one of those. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone to college. Now, the funny thing about that to me now is the scholarship was for $5,000. Now, $5,000 paid for 4 years tuition, books, fees, expenses, and had some money left over. Right now, a graduate course costs $5,000. But nonetheless, I was successful in Temple. I was an honor student and all that. And I wanted to be a music teacher. So I got my degree. I actually got a job before I graduated as a sub for the spring before I graduated. Anyway, there's a test given for music teachers, for prospective teachers. They test your performance, your knowledge of history. And they have a verbal test. So anyway, I was a good performer as a pianist and singer. I knew all the stuff in terms of the written test. I got, flying colors. Then they got me to the oral test, and I know I was going to just zoom on. And they started asking me questions that didn't make any sense. You're a teacher, and a truck driver comes in and says, why does my kid have to take music? No kind of question is that. Then I found out later on that there's a thing where they would routinely fail Black applicants as full-time teachers, but would offer them what they call a long-term sub position, where you made less money, you had fewer benefits, but you did the same job that full-time teachers did. Well, that didn't make sense to me. So I went right down to the testing office, signed up again for the next test was in summertime. In the summertime, all of the big bosses, as it were on vacation. And I took the test. Of course, I zoomed through it because I think the people who were giving the test didn't get the memo that the Negroes can't pass the test. So anyway, I was first on the list for jobs in the city, and I got my job. But I was always resentful of that because of the color of one's skin, they assume that you can't do as well as. Now, of course, the white kids got the jobs, even the ones who weren't as good as. And I can name some other, for instance, a good friend of mine, George Allen, who was a master teacher from the school system from, Lincoln University. Everybody who knows the name that he's a master teacher. They did the same thing to him. And there are a lot of people. Earl Williams Jones made a number of names. That goes way back. A professional singer. They didn't like her voice because she was a jazz and pop singer. Anyway, that's one thing that I decided, in spite of the barrier, I was going through anyway. They're not going to keep me down because of the color of my skin. I got my degree, and then I applied for Community College of Philadelphia, a graduate degree. And at the time, this was 1970, and a lot of the schools wanted to integrate, which is great, because most of the faculties had a couple African-American members. So I got the job. I was the first tenure track instructor of music at Community College. And I was pretty successful as a teacher, and I rose through the ranks quickly. I made this associate professor in 3 years, which is pretty quick. And they were still trying to find what they called qualified Black candidates. So my department was growing. We were booming because we had a lot of courses in African-American studies and music. It was a combined art and music department. So we had a lot of courses. We were awarded 4 full-time positions at the same time. So I told the hiring committee, I forgot. In the meantime, they had elected me department chair because it would look good to have a Black guy heading the department. But they thought I would be a safe hire and just go along with the program. So I said, okay. I told the hiring committee, you really need to find some Black candidates. Oh, we're going to find some qualified Black candidates. Well, of course, they didn't find any qualified Black candidates. Now, they never looked for qualified white candidates, but they have to find qualified Black candidates. They found none. I didn't accept that. So I, on my own, through the grapevine, found people I knew who were outstanding. These are names that go back a lot of years. A friend of mine, Joy Simpson, who was passed on, was an opera singer. She's just gotten her master's from Juilliard. Rachel Miller was invited to Russia to take part in the Tchaikovsky piano competition. We had another candidate, George Starks, who spent years teaching at Drexel, head of their jazz band, PhD in musicology. Anyway, I had 3 outstanding people for the job to teach music courses. I went down to Howard. Howard had a curriculum in African-American art. And I discovered a teacher there who had just gotten a master's, so I offered her the job. So it turns out that we had 4 outstanding candidates who shone way above the non-Black candidates, and the school was glad they hired them. And of course, that's when the stuff hit the fan. I'll say stuff hit the fan, all right? And how could he hire 4 of them at the same time? I'll never forget that. But as it turns out, they filed a reverse discrimination suit because the white people weren't hired. How could you possibly hire 4 Black people at the same time? Of course, they lost. But it just shows you the kinds of things that have to be done. So my advice, I don't want to keep going on. I know you have a time limit. But my advice to Black men in the system, don't expect the system, whatever institution you're dealing with, to give you anything. You have to take it. Well, my strategy did, and I would suggest it, I used the term, do whatever you have to do to get a seat at the table. You have to get degrees, get your degree, jump through the hoops. And when you get a seat at the table, that's when you're on the inside. I remember back in the Black Power days, we had protests and people were rioting. Well, that's not the way to do things. They want you to do that. Even this summer in 2020, they wanted you to do that. But they were definitely afraid if you actually went through the system. That's why they were so petrified, terrified of Barack Obama. Here's a Black man, top of his class, Ivy League school, top of his class at Harvard, an intelligent Black man. It scared him to death. That's why the first thing out of Mitch McConnell's mouth was, we're going to make him a one-term president. So my advice to young Black men today, take the time to get whatever training you need. If you're a professional, fine. If you are want to learn a trade, fine. But whatever you do the best that you can do so that you can open doors for other people. Once you get inside and sit at the table, then you can make the policies that will allow others to follow you, because that's what you have to do. You have to reach back. Now, some folks make it and say, well, I got mine, they can get theirs. No, it's incumbent upon all of us who have the drive and are fortunate enough to accomplish whatever we accomplish, to make sure that the other younger brothers and sisters behind us have an opportunity to do the same thing. So in a nutshell, it wasn't much of a nutshell, but that's what Black manhood means to me. You have to, first of all, accept your Blackness. You have to know your heritage, your roots. You have to know your African heritage. You have to embrace it. You have to understand the struggles that we went through, but you have to understand also that we can overcome them ourselves by our own drive, our own initiative, and our own striving for excellence. So that's my answer.
That's awesome. That's an awesome answer. Thank you so much. So our second question is, who and or what is important to you?
Who? Well, who? I'll say what first. What is music, obviously. Because as a musician, I started music when I was about 6 or 7. And I took lessons from my mother who played the piano. And when they realized I had some talent, they found a professional teacher, and I ended up taking lessons. I played in church since I was 7 or 8, and up until I was in my 70s, actually, so a long time doing that. And I was a little bit of a prodigy and won some competitions and stuff. But then when my father died at age 12, the lessons stopped because the money stopped, and then I was fortunate in a sense, because then I went into non-classical music and learned how to play jazz and blues and pop. So that gave me a kind of well-rounded background. Then I went to Temple and got my formal education. So I was fortunate enough to have that dual track of the traditional European music and then African-American music. What's important to me, friends, family. As I've gotten older, a lot of my childhood friends have passed on. But wife, son, have a wonderful daughter-in-law, grandson, small family. And they're the ones who are important to me now.
That's great. Excellent. Thank you. So how do you want us to see you, Dr. White?
To see me? Well, I think I've kind of done what I'm going to do. I mean, I've had a wonderful career And ironically, as a musician, I say this a lot, I got paid good money to do what I love to do. And I would have done a lot of things anyway, but people paid me money, so that's great. And music was very good to me, and I really appreciate it. It's a very comfortable lifestyle. And, I've tried to pass it on to others that I know. As a college professor, I've had hundreds of youngsters that I've influenced. A lot of them go on to be very successful as operatic singers, classical musicians, jazz musicians, church musicians, all over the place.
That's awesome. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. So, what is your epic dream?
Epic dream. I don't know. Epic dream. Well, it's all involved with music. I wanted to be the best that I could be. And I started out as a performer, as a pianist and vocalist. Then I decided I was going to do music theory and composition and then music education. But my biggest love actually was conducting. And at the time, there weren't any schools in the East Coast that had graduate degrees in conducting, so I sought out the best teachers at the time, conducting teachers, and went around wherever they were. I went to get seminars and workshops, and I was very fortunate to have some of the best teachers available. And that gave me a good background. I was very successful in that. I had my choir, the Clayton White Singers, for 35 years. And we first started out doing the traditional European music called the Dead White Guys, Bach, Beethoven, Montel. And we did that because at that time, folks said, well, all Black people can do is sing spirituals and gospel. So my choir sang with, for instance, opera Ebony, that goes way back in history, full stage productions of Aida, Faust, Carmen, Figaro, at the Academy of Music, quality stuff. They also sang, interestingly enough, background stuff like the Barry Manilow, which is kind of out there for a Black choir. And we spent a lot of time also in jazz music. The name Trudy Pitts is a legend in Philadelphia, Trudy Pitts and Mr. C. And we were very close personally. Our families are very close. But we have done dozens of concerts. Jazz in the Sanctuary, it was called. And with their group and my choir, we sang all over the place. Jazz music, but in a religious setting. A lot of the music we did was Duke Ellington, because I really love his sacred concerts. In fact, I orchestrated a scaled down version. Unfortunately, Duke didn't write out the scores, full scores for his music. So as I started to do it, I realized I had to do it myself. So I eventually did most of the sacred concerts for a smaller band, and we did those quite a bit. It's been done by Westminster Choir College. Other colleges and universities have done it. Some churches have done it. So that's my biggest, one of the big things that I think I left behind.
Got it. Awesome. That's excellent. So I think you have been answering this question all along implicitly, but I'm going to ask you explicitly. Dr. White, who are you?
Who am I? Well, right now I'm retired and old, feeble, with a lot of wonderful memories. Fortunately, I can still do music in terms of, I can't do the organ anymore because of arthritis, but I can still play the piano. I still compose. When I retired, I took up bridge, the card game. I was pretty successful in that. I won some national titles as a bridge player. I became a bridge teacher. I still enjoy swimming, and that's about it.
Awesome. Well, here we are at question 6, which is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't, or you wanted me to ask you that I didn't? In other words, what did I miss?
No, you're pretty thorough. Pretty thorough.
Awesome. Well, Dr. White, thank you so much for your wisdom, for the history lesson, for really giving us an insight into not only your life, but the lives of so many, particularly Black intellectuals, and anyone who is an expert in their field, and particularly from the time that you were becoming into your manhood and into your professional life, as well as your thoughts about these ideas. I remember as a native Philadelphian and then becoming a musician, just seeing with awe, like Dr. Clayton White and the Clayton White singers, like, oh my goodness. And, I remember the first time singing one of your pieces and hearing your work up front and hearing a retrospective concert and just all of a sudden being in a similar sphere is just very heady for me and just very inspiring. And so I just want to thank you so much for your contributions to all of us, our society as a whole, in ways that we probably will never know the full impact. Because as an educator, you're touching one body, but that body touches so many others, and all of the folks that you mentored throughout the years. And so I just want to thank you and honor you, my king. I just pray that you will continue to grow strong, and I look forward to hearing more of your music. And I just thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us for this conversation. Please stay tuned for next week for yet another amazing king. In the meantime, if there's any Black men that you want to highlight in this forum, please click the link either in my bio or below or DM me, and we will take it from there. And in the meantime, please remember to spread love and have a great day. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. White.
Thank you. Same to you.